The meeting has been called to order for Corvallis School Board business meeting on October 8th, 2020. The first point on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me if you are willing and able to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. I want to especially welcome the audience and the public who are joining us through the YouTube stream, and also those who are going to be watching this recorded. And special welcome as well for our student representatives who will be introduced shortly. Welcome. So with that, I want to move to the next item on the agenda, and which is the board member reports. Is there any board member reports that board members would like to share with us? And as a reminder, let's use the virtual hand on the platform. All right, I will share a couple of quick updates. The first one, I got my flu shot using the coupon that the school district has been providing for the employees of the districts and their families and friends to be used. And I know that today there was a session at the school district, and there will be another one soon. And anyone from friends and family who go to Safeway on Circle can go there and get their flu shot, and also have them donate on your behalf $1 to the homeless program. So thank you for the school district for doing this work. And I would personally encourage every person who's able and who can get the flu shot to get it, because that's an outbreak that we can prevent, and we need to do our best to do that. The other thing I want to share is that School Foundation Board of Trustees had a training recently on fundraising and philanthropy, and part of the discussion was really around board goals and how those goals really serve very well with the outreach to donors and community support. So I want to really highlight the importance of that document and how it's played and continues to play a very good tool for collaboration with the foundation. And I anticipate when we have them joining us soon, that will be a good point of discussion and a tool for us to use. So I really look forward for the discussion on the board goals today, and moving on as well afterwards. With that, if there's no other board reports, I would like to ask Ryan to introduce our student representatives. Welcome, and Ryan.
All right, well, board members, we had an opportunity to meet with our student representatives prior to the meeting tonight to talk a little bit about their role. And also just to highlight how the role this year is somewhat different than years in the past, in that they have new experiences and perspectives to share with us as students who have been in distance learning since last March, and are continuing that this school year from all three of our high schools. So I think it's really, as we always say, we want our students to feel comfortable speaking up in these meetings. But this year, I think there's a unique perspective that they come to us with. I gave the example that typically I get to spend lots of time in schools and in classrooms, and this year it's different than that because of the format. And so they really do have unique perspectives to share with us as we make decisions about how to support their learning and their future endeavors. So with that being said, I wanted to take a moment to introduce the school board reps for the year, and then I'm going to turn it over and let them introduce themselves as well and share a little bit about who they are. So from College Hill, we have Jesse Martin and Sunitha Black. From Corvallis High School, we have Ezra Hart and Kristen Moon. And finally from CV, we have Kate Volz. And Kate was able to be a rep last year, and also Calvin Karleski. So I'd like to take just a moment to open the opportunity for them to introduce themselves and share a little bit about who they are. So we'll start with College Hill. So Jesse, would you mind starting us off?
Yeah, well, I actually started at CV my freshman year, and I didn't expect to go to College Hill, but last minute I kind of transferred over here, and I've always had a very, I don't know, I'm always very anxious, and I had no idea that I would be on the school board. So this is very exciting, and I'm glad that I'm
Thanks, Jesse. And then Sunitha.
Hello, I'm Sunita, and I go to College Hill. I went to CV my freshman and sophomore year, and I decided to go. I'm going to College Hill because I needed a smaller environment to work in and more one-on-one with the teachers. And I found College Hill really helpful, and the teachers there are really amazing. So, yeah, thank you for having me.
And then from CHS, Ezra, would you mind sharing?
Yeah, hello, my name is Ezra Hart. I'm a senior at CHS, and I'm also ASB president with Kristen Moon. And I've been going to the schools in Corvallis since I've moved here about 8 years ago.
Kristen.
My name is Kristen Moon, and I'm a senior as well. I've only ever lived in Corvallis, so for my elementary, middle school, I went to Zion Lutheran, and now I'm at CHS.
All right, and then to our student reps from Crescent Valley. So Kate.
Hi everyone, so I'm Kate. I'm a junior at CV. I went to Husky Elementary School and then Shawlin and then now CV. As far as like a little bit about me, I do speech and debate. I'm in leadership and band, and I also participate in Youth Volunteer Corps, and I'm on different youth advisory boards for that. So yeah.
Great, thanks Kate. And then Calvin.
Okay, so hello, I'm Calvin. I'm a sophomore at CV, and I suppose not too much about me that's interesting, but I speak Norwegian. That's interesting.
Thanks, Calvin. And so, yeah, it was a great opportunity to meet this group tonight, and just to hear a little bit about the schools they've attended. I think we have students who represent, who've started out in some of our private schools, our charter schools, our other public schools as elementary students, and for the most part have been with us for the majority of their school careers. So again, we talked about, as they share their voice in these meetings, to think about, their educational experience here in Corvallis from the time they were 5 potentially, all the way through some of them being probably 17 and 18 at this point. So anyhow, it's a great opportunity to continue to learn and learn from students that are in our classrooms in our schools every day. So thanks to this group for joining us on this journey this year.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, students. Congratulations on being here, and thank you for being here. On behalf of the board, I want to welcome you and also let you know that this board is committed for the student voice to be centered in our decision making. So please continue to share your voice and help us make the best decisions for our students. And again, we're excited to be working with you. Now, next is the superintendent's reports.
All right, so I have a couple of areas I wanted to highlight for you tonight. The first one, as we again think about the school year and how we continue to adapt and maintain some of our traditions and programs that we've had historically. One of the things that's going on this week and next week to draw your attention to is the college planning. That's college planning night and college family planning around college this week and next week. And so if you have students who are high school age you've probably received notification from either Beyond CHS or Beyond CV about college planning, and some of the sessions are set up from everything from learning how to complete a FAFSA form to Financial Aid 101 to the OSU LBCC degree partnership, the Western Undergraduate Exchange, and other opportunities through LBCC and some of our CTE programs. So this year it's all gone virtual. So there's still sessions that are open to learn about colleges and universities across the West and some universities across our country, but to do it in a different fashion and still have the opportunity to meet with college counselors. So anyhow, it's just again, one of those examples of how we're doing things a little bit differently this year, but still trying to make those opportunities available to students and families. So I know several of you have students nearing that age or at that age, so it's always a good reminder and just a good reminder for our community. The second point I wanted to talk about briefly is just the decision to postpone in-person learning. And so, as you know, I sent out a notification to the community yesterday, letting them know that we'll be in distance learning again for quite some time. It's disappointing to share that because we obviously would prefer to have students in school. You know, one of the things I've talked about has been one of the highlights of the year for teachers and for staff have been supply pickup, when they were able to see their students roll through, even if it was in their vehicle, just to get supplies, just to have that interaction, because really that's why we're educators, to be with and working with students. So it was difficult to make that decision, but in this case, it wasn't a decision even left to me to make. We haven't met the metrics to reopen. Over the last 4 weeks, the numbers continue to rise. What we continue to look at information that comes to us based on Benton County cases per 100,000, and those numbers over the last 4 weeks have gone from 20 to mid 30s 2 weeks in a row, and then finally 40. And so we've seen that uptick, and those numbers don't allow us to, based on OHA guidelines and ODE guidelines, to even have in-person learning happening in our schools. The reason why we went with dates that are January 4th as the date was really because what we're trying to do is two things. One, provide predictability for families rather than say, well, it might happen in a couple of weeks, and just continue to have people sort of hang on pins and needles. We wanted to make sure that people understood that as we move into flu season and our numbers continue to go up, we just want people to anticipate and in some ways hunker down and plan on being in distance learning for quite some time. Again, the announcements are never easy to make. There's disappointment, but I also think it's important that we share with our community that information in such a way that it manages expectations and lets people know that this is where we're going to be for quite some time. Again, ideally we'd be in classrooms with kids, but until those numbers go down, we're just not able to do that. At the same time, I know that there's advocacy for individuals to say, are there changes that we can make to the metrics? I know that I've seen some information coming out of the state about reviewing those and revising those. I don't have any idea what that will look like coming forth in the future, but as of right now, we're not meeting the metrics, and I just needed the community to understand that and plan around that. So I will, it's hard. I can't emphasize that enough, but it's a decision that we have to continue to make to keep our community as healthy as possible. A couple of other key pieces I wanted to share with you. The next one is about the school renaming task force. And so we have moved forward with our school renaming task force and identified participants. One of the things that has come up in conversations with applicants and participants in that process is some anxiety about having the meetings streamed. and their ability to share their voice in the process in such a public way. And so I'm going to come back to you at the next board meeting with a revision to my superintendent task force charter document. Currently it reads, all meetings will be open to the public to observe. The modification I'm going to make is going to be all meeting minutes will be made public as a mechanism for public review and input. So rather than stream meetings, we will make sure that meeting minutes are taken and provided to the community to provide the opportunity for public input and engagement in that format. At the same time, I want to make sure that the space is a space where all the members of the task force feel comfortable and confident in speaking up and sharing their perspective and views. And I feel like that's a superintendent's task force, that's my responsibility. And so it's a modification I plan to make with that responsibility in mind. So I just wanted to bring that to all of you as you see that revision coming forward at our next board meeting. Another highlight tonight, there'll be the opportunity for you to take action on a resolution for Indigenous Peoples Day, which is an exciting thing for us here in the school district to recognize the Native American people in our community, in our country, and to recognize and celebrate culture. And so one of the things that I wanted people to be aware of is something that Dr. Whitebear had shared with us previously, the Indigenous Peoples Day celebrations that are going on, including the OSU Facebook Live event on Monday from 12 to 1:30. So I'm anticipating we will talk a little bit more about that later in the meeting, but I just wanted to highlight that and make sure that was on everyone's radar as well. The final piece I wanted to share tonight is something that I'm going to be sharing out as information for the community. And prior to doing that, I wanted to share it with you as a way for you to sort of hear it from me first as I continue to highlight and elevate our work around racial equity. So oftentimes I sort of do these impromptu talks and I keep my notes next to me and I reference them when I need to. And other times when it's something I don't want to mince words on, I just read it straight from my notes. So that's what I'm going to do with this. And again, this is a piece that will be shared out with the public here soon. So here we go. So this is a statement of solidarity with students, staff, and communities of color. We believe that Black Lives Matter is fundamentally an affirmative social justice statement that aligns with our commitment to students and staff, Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other students of color. Who have been historically underserved by the American education system. It's not only an acknowledgement of the disparities in our own system, but a commitment that we will address and interrupt the disparities that persist for our historically marginalized students. We will not stand by or be complicit to institutional disparities that perpetuate inequities for our Black, Indigenous, and students and staff of color. We're committed to building an educational system that addresses institutional racism and empowers, honors, and celebrates the cultures and identities of our diverse student population, empowering their voices and perspectives as shared partners in the educational system. As outlined in our district's educational equity policy, educational equity is based on the principles of social justice and allocating resources, opportunity, treatment, and creating success for each student. As a public school district, we honor and validate all viewpoints to the extent that they do not promote hate, racism, or discrimination of any kind. We believe that public schools have the ability to promote racial equity of underrepresented people without giving equal time to intolerance and ignorance, and can specifically prohibit students and educators from using hate language or displaying hate symbols as discussed in our student code of conduct. In an effort to create a district culture of acceptance, authentic care, and connection, free from language or symbols that are not in line with our district's beliefs and values. We want to be clear that we do not endorse any organized group or political campaign. We support the State Board of Education's recent passage of the Oregon Department of Education administrative rule referred to as All Students Belong. The administrative rule focuses on the health and safety of students and educators by creating a more inclusive and hate-free school climate. It also bans symbols of hate, including the Nazi swastika, noose, and Confederate flag from schools. Equity and action in our schools. We're committed to becoming an anti-racist school district, a system that creates policies, practices, and procedures to promote racial equity, and that is committed to providing a culturally relevant, responsive, and inclusive environment for all students, especially our most marginalized. We're committed to providing a learning environment in our virtual or in-person classrooms where all students, including our Black, Indigenous, and students of color, can show up as their authentic selves and be proud of their language, ethnicity, race, and nationality. We're committed to creating learning environments where students can engage in critical thinking and discourse that promotes safe spaces for students to learn from diverse perspectives and result in action that promotes equity and civil discourse in our schools. For the 2021 school year, we will be engaging in further exploration of this work at every grade level in our district. This month, our K-5 students will be introduced to the concepts of identity, diversity, race, and racism in an age-appropriate curriculum aligned with the Oregon K-12 social science academic content standards and the Oregon ethnic studies standards. This work continues in social studies classes at the upper grades as we foster important conversations and create safe spaces for students to make sense of the world around them. For example, we're living through one of the largest social movements in the history of our nation. To not allow students to discuss what they're seeing in the Black Lives Matter and related social movements, as well as the various responses to those movements, would be a lost opportunity to engage in real-time authentic learning. We understand that these conversations are not occasions to promote or advocate personal values or beliefs regarding politics, religions, or other cultural issues. Our role as educators is to facilitate conversations about issues in a tolerant and inclusive manner, and inclusive environment as described in School Board Policy INB. We want our classrooms, whether physical or virtual, to be welcoming spaces to all students. We recognize that students have a right to freedom of expression, as long as that expression isn't substantially disruptive to the educational environment and doesn't infringe on the rights of others to access their education. So again, as we continue the work ahead of us and supporting our teachers and staff that are teaching day in and day out with our students, and also in a pretty visible way these days, I wanted to share with the board and the community where I stand, and as a way to support our staff and our community as we continue to move forward. So I'll be sharing that again more broadly in the future, but before doing that, I wanted to make sure that I shared it with all of you. So that's the conclusion of my superintendent's report tonight.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. Jay, you have a question?
I just had a couple of quick comments. First of all, thank you as an old social studies teacher for your perspective and I think stake in the ground about the value of talking and helping students learn authentically about these issues. So very appreciative. The lightweight notes, sorry, that I wanted to be sure you clarified. With respect to the school renaming group, it's really a complete public input circle, except that public is invited to provide input. They just won't be listening in on the committee response. Am I thinking that's correct? And then they'll get minutes to hear what's going on. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, Jay, that is a fair statement. Again, the meetings will not be live streamed, but the minutes will be shared out in a timely fashion so that community can read through those minutes. And then we still have identified 2 opportunities for public input into the process. And those things all still hold true as we move forward with that renaming process.
Thank you. And my other comment is regarding metrics and Oregon Health Administration. I think it's really important that the public understand that we are following state guidelines, and we have received some very, I would say, high level, thoughtful input about issues around health. And that kind of information would be well served to go to the Oregon Health Administration, because we have to stay within the guidelines. It's not like we can override them.
Yeah, that's true as well. I think that is, there was an Oregonian article yesterday that the governor's office is looking at those metrics right now or in the near future. So public input would probably be best served with OHA as those decisions continue to be either upheld or revised. And then, you know, the thing that goes without saying, but I think it's important to incorporate, is that, you know, proper hand washing, social distancing, wearing masks are still key ways that we as members of the community can help to maintain and lower numbers. That's what's in our circle of influence and ability to control right now. And I know that feels difficult when those are the only things you're able to control, but those habits and patterns are really important.
Thank you, Jay. Any further comments, Jay? Thank you. Next up is Sarah.
Thank you, Ryan. I had a couple questions about reopening, but you answered them in your statement, so thank you for that. I just wanted to also comment that I've been hearing really encouraging, positive, thankful things from parents about the race and equity education that is happening in our schools. I've encouraged parents who are feeling that way to share that with the district so that we're hearing the good voices. So I just want to commend you and commend all of our teachers and staff who are working on that with our kids. You know, I, from across the hall, was hearing some of the identity discussions going on over the last week, and it's really, you know, on an elementary school level, very appropriate and very powerful stuff. You know, if anything, what I'm hearing is we could do more. So that's the feedback I'm getting. I also want to thank you for the adjustments to the naming task force. I feel like we want to have everybody's voices heard, and the public will be able to get those voices through the minutes and contribute their own. But if having open meetings is going to prevent volunteers who are important to this process from participating, then I think not streaming our meetings is a really positive thing. We've seen that with this issue in the past, you know, as board members, we've gotten some abusive and racist emails about it, and there's no reason to force that same kind of treatment on our volunteers. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up is Vince and then Lou. Vince?
3 items of appreciation. First is setting a priority for the safety of our children in our community and extending comprehensive CDL. And I can tell you that there was groaning in my household when the announcement went out. I think we're all disappointed, and we would rather have kids in schools, but safety comes first, and I appreciate that. Also, I appreciate your choice to change the format for the school renaming task force. I'm not going to belabor it. It needs to be a safe space. We need to get the best possible outcome out of that process. So thank you for that. And then, but I'm really appreciated your statement that you just made. School boards express themselves through policy and through the priorities that they set and the discourse that they have in their meetings. And they don't often get to make bold statements. And so I know that this board is on the right track because our superintendent just made a very, very clear call for board action or for action about social justice and where this district is headed. And we've already seen that evidenced in classrooms, or well, in virtual classrooms this year. And so I'm just very appreciative for the responsiveness and the courage of the superintendent and his leadership team and our teachers that are working so hard to educate our children.
Thank you, Vince. Appreciate it. Lou?
Yeah, hi Ryan. I just had a couple of comments and one question. I'll ask the question first just because it's more technical.
Okay.
Now that the announcement's gone out about school continuing to be in the modality it is right now, and seeing the numbers in the enrollment packet that we got with the majority of students being on hybrid, I'm wondering how the support's looking for the online students. Is it the same? Like, how does that, like the infrastructure support, is it equitable in that sense? Like, because I'm not sure what it looks like on the online side.
Yeah, so there are some differences between the two. One of the main differences is the level of independence that is required in the Corvallis Online model. It is, when students enrolled in it, we did contact every family of the 800 to say, we just want you to know this is what the program is going to be like. So some advice about that and goodness of fit. So those things were taken into account. At the same time, some of the structures that we have in place to make sure that students are successful, our student support teams are still meeting with Corvallis Online, but also making sure that connection is maintained at the home school. So we're continuing to work on that. So I would say that Corvallis Online has Corvallis teachers that are leading those classes, but there's a higher level of independence that's happening in that format, less synchronous learning than you would see in the hybrid model.
Okay, I think I didn't phrase it good. I meant more for the staff, like the teacher support, like how.
Oh yeah. So we've assigned two principals, Mark Henderson at the high school and middle school, and then Byron Bethers at the elementary. They're having staff meetings and checking in with one another. There's some professional development that goes with it. But also one of the things that we were told early on is to think a lot about these teachers as almost like new teachers, first year teachers, because the format is so different. So, but they are having professional development and meeting as a cohort and checking in with one another. So in terms of the support, it should look and feel to them a lot like it does to other teachers right now who are also remote.
Okay, cool, thanks. I think that that just wasn't something that we really clarified for the community yet, like how the support looks for both of those modalities. And since it's going to be a little more extended, thinking that might be appreciated. That way families know what the support looks like. So thank you. And then the other part, what's been said, but about the task force meetings happening, not being live streamed, and appreciating that for the reasons that Sarah said and basically everybody else said, and wanted just to add in that I think it puts value on what we expect of volunteers differently. Like, we're not expecting them to be live streamed, and there's a lot of interesting things that can happen with that. And I really appreciate that privacy piece for them to feel comfortable being able to have conversations and open conversations. So yeah. And with the message that you just read, I just wanted to appreciate that very much, the thought that you put into the message and the passion behind it as you read it. And I'm looking forward to the actions that come out of that, because there's a lot of action in your statement. And I think it's clear, it should be clear for the community that you're not just making a statement, you're looking at actually putting it into motion for the family. the kids in the community. I appreciate you putting the emphasis on that it's more than just reading the statement tonight and sending it out on email. Yeah, so thank you. Oh, and one more thing too, the other half of the Indigenous Peoples Day live stream, the proclamation signing for the city of Corvallis is at 5:30.
Okay, on the same day?
Yeah.
Okay,
Very cool.
thanks.
Thank you, Lou. Any further comments or questions from board members or students representatives? Now, Jay?
This is a question that you talked about students. I have had a couple of parents talk to me about cameras at home. And I think while we have kids, one of the questions that I have of high school kids is it possible for you to participate in a class and blank out your background? This is a real simple technical world where I don't have to show my room or my kitchen or my parents' kitchen. Have you guys had that ability? This is kind of a problem because I don't think we need to be into people's homes, but we also don't want to have students turn off their cameras so that the teacher can't interact. So I'm just curious as to what you all know or can do with your cameras that you're working with. Just a quick review.
Thank you, Jay. I have Kate and Calvin, so let's start with Kate. And for others who would like to speak, I would say raise your virtual hand on the platform.
Yeah, so yeah, that actually had like I don't remember exactly which teacher was talking about that, but that kind of is a problem. I know that like on Zoom sometimes, depending on how glitchy Zoom is being at the time, you can like Dr. Whitebear is doing, do a background whatever for your Zoom, and that can sometimes work depending on like what version of Zoom you have. And some teachers, like I think I have 2 teachers that use like Google Meets, and there's a blur background on that, but like it makes it go slower. So I don't usually do it, but I can also like I'm personally have the privilege of like being in my own room and having a space where I can be not interrupted during the school day, and I know a lot of people don't have that. So I do think that that's something that I've heard come up, and I don't really think there's an easy solution for that. So that's kind of what I would say to that.
Awesome, thank you. I have Kate and Sunita. Let's start, sorry, Calvin and then Sunita. Calvin?
Yeah, kind of expanding on what Kate said. For school-issued Chromebooks, you can't do a background, but finding a wall behind you, like what Mr. Conroy was saying, where it's kind of just a simple background could work. However, a lot of people might not have those areas available to them during the school day. So yeah.
Thank you. Sunita?
My answer to this question would be that for me personally, with my Zoom meetings, with the classes being smaller, I don't have a problem turning my camera on ever. I'm always in my room. However, when I'm talking to a teacher like on Zoom, I always put my camera on to talk because it just, to me, it seems weird when I'm talking to the screen with and not seeing like it just, yeah. So that's how I feel. If everyone had their screen on, then I wouldn't have a problem, but of course that one, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Jay, does that answer your question or you have any follow-up? We're good, thank you. So next, Lou, and I saw Sarah momentarily, so let me know if you, okay, you're good. So Lou?
Yeah, I was just adding on just to reemphasize what they were saying, like it depends on what computer you're using. So, and I don't think you can do that on the iPads either. I haven't tried it on, maybe you can actually. I think you can on the iPads and not on the Chromebooks. And so it's just how they're set up, and not all computers are compatible with the backgrounds. And so it does make it a challenge. One thing I would hope is that people are understanding that kids and students may need to turn their cameras off for whatever their reasons are. And it is quite an issue though, not just in K-12, but also at the higher ed level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes. Sarah.
Sorry, and this, I was not going to say this, but it sort of follows a little bit on what Lou was saying. I heard when the statement about privacy went out, some grumbling especially from parents with younger kids about, well, why can't we be sitting right there watching? Because we're sitting there, my kid needs me to be right there for them to stay on task. And I think there was, some disconnect that, like, being next to your kid to help them participate in class is different from somebody who may not have private space or may not be comfortable. I am sure there are students who sit in their classroom and they look at all their classmates who have their own rooms that they're working in, and they are not in their own rooms, and they're maybe in a, apartment or a house with, several other family members around. And so I think there was some disconnect there on why sort of making, encouraging parents to not sit there and watch the Zoom meetings was part of the privacy thing. That, it's bad enough if you're feeling self-conscious about your classmates seeing into your home, but then if everybody in their family is coming and peeking into your home, that just adds to it. So I think we just all need to be aware that because of the way we are learning right now, we are seeing into people's lives in ways that not everyone has the same level of comfort with. And so if, whatever we can do to help students who, use backgrounds or whatever, I think would be really beneficial for those kids. And for parents who are trying to help their kids, be cognizant of that you're seeing into all these children's homes, and that's really not your role. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, this is really great discussion, and I don't want to cut it because it's really valuable, but we need to move on. With one comment I want to add, and really reflects this discussion that I heard. Ryan, you demonstrated a bold and courageous leadership. You're not making the decisions that seem to be easy or even comfortable. You're making the right decisions. And also, I can see an intention behind this. That if I was a teacher or a staff member in the district, I can see that this says, if you do the right thing, we got your back. We stand for the right things, and we need to continue staying with the right things and the right statements. So thank you for that courageous leadership.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. With that, I want to now open up the public and staff comments period. So the public and staff comment period is open now, and we do have one speaker. Helen, welcome, and can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. So our first speaker is Helen Higgins, and Helen, I will read the script that I have to read for our public comment speakers, and then you can start your testimony. Speakers may offer objective criticism of district operations and programs, but the board will not hear complaints concerning individual district personnel. Complaints shall be handled in accordance with board policy KL, which is available online. The board chair has the right to terminate a speaker's privilege of address if, after being called to order, the speaker persists in improper conduct. You will have 3 minutes to make your comments. I will alert you when you have 30 seconds left and when your time is up. And I'm going to make an experiment if you can hear this.
Yes, I can hear that.
Wonderful. So that will be the prompt the first time for the 30 seconds and the second time for the 3 minutes. Following your comments, the board will have an opportunity for 3 minutes to ask clarifying questions. And I would like to ask the board members and student representatives if they have any clarifying questions to indicate that through the virtual hand if they desire to. With that, Helen, welcome, and you can start whenever you feel, whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, thank you. Again, this is Helen Higgins. I'm the CEO for the Boys and Girls Club, and I thought it would be a great time to just check in with all of you to let you know what's happening with our emergency childcare program that started back on April 1st. And hopefully you guys received the email update from me back on August 21st that talked about our school year plans. So to meet the urgent needs to provide childcare for essential workers, we worked with the CSD leadership, Joe Lycum and Melissa Harder, in preparation to open up our doors. The club is providing full-day childcare for 1st through 6th grade kids under the strict safety and ratio requirements of the Early Learning Childcare Division, and requirements that continue to be in place for us today. Health and safety, of course, are our top priority, and it begins with the hand washing stations out front provided by the district, daily temperature checks, and health screening questions before entering the building, and we sanitize our spaces throughout the day. We must choreograph the movement of the cohorts for bathroom breaks and playgrounds or gym time, basically anytime they leave their cohort classroom bubble. We've been wearing masks since day one, and students began wearing them on August 1st, and they've adapted quickly and well. And I'm thankful to report that we've made it through another day of no COVID infections for my staff, students, or our families. So our current capacity for 1st through 6th grade is 135 students. To put that in perspective, we normally serve about 1,000 kids each day during the school year. Our capacity is limited by the space and cohort size requirements of emergency childcare. We just opened our Johnson Teen Center for teens from 7th through 12th grade from noon to 6. Teens can come and go, get help with distance learning, tutoring, and also partake in the daily lunch or dinner service that is also provided through CSD. We do not charge for the teen program. This is definitely not business as usual. With the health and safety requirements, it's a very complex system to run. So I want to at least acknowledge my staff who stepped into the risk of running childcare during the pandemic, and they just continue to maintain their energy and enthusiasm as we exited summer and rolled right into the school year. So to keep the childcare program affordable, we're only charging a portion of the actual cost. It's $45 a day per child to deliver this service, and we're only charging $20. Currently, there are 95 students registered and 60% are on scholarship. 35 of our scholarship families pay no fees at all. You can probably imagine the heavy lifting that's happening to fill that financial gap. 2 weeks ago, we made adjustments to the schedule after getting the first 2 weeks of the school year under our belt, and we're working with the elementary principals to optimize our stringent childcare schedule with the variation of distance learning schedules from each school and each teacher. We've seen big improvements in ensuring that hybrid students are able to connect to most of their calls, and the Corvallis online students were not impacted by our schedule changes. So a bright spot for working families in all of this is their children are benefiting from the social aspects of the child care program. They have daily access to adult mentors and are getting engaging hands-on enrichment with lots of physical movement during the non-Zoom hours. So the Boys and Girls Club will continue to provide this service and focus on our fundraising efforts to pay for it while school buildings remain closed, which sounds like it might be a little longer. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Helen. I appreciate your comments. Any board members or student representatives with any questions? Seeing none. Oh, we have one actually. You have a question from Vince. Vince?
Well, and I'd like to express appreciation for the partnership with the Boys and Girls Club, and just want to express my appreciation for you working closely with district staff. And the reality is that school districts can't meet the needs of all students without partnerships, and that's true in Corvallis and so true across Oregon and the United States. So I just appreciate the partnership. And I'm worried about sustainability of, because the reality is that these programs, it costs money to do this work. So you mentioned fundraising, and I'm worried about the fiscal sustainability of Boys and Girls Club in our community. And I worry about you guys. And so can you speak to that at all? And I know that's a sensitive topic, but I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you acknowledging that. My mean time between gray hair colorings is increasing. So, but we're we're just looking at every angle possible. So I worked with the county commissioners, and Zan helped connect us with some funds through Community Services Consortium. The Boys and Girls Clubs of Oregon just met with the governor. We had a telephone call with her on, I think it was Wednesday, maybe Tuesday, to talk to her about the situation of childcare, because childcare, it's become very apparent, the lack of funding at all levels, right, from the federal to the state down. So I think we've been trying to really shine a light on that. Of course, we've been spending a lot of time fundraising just to make sure we can keep it going. So, we're doing what we can. I think if you've got connections to lawmakers, keep pushing on the concept of not just childcare for 0 to 5-year-olds, but it's really the school age kids that aren't even in the conversation in the early learning division and the childcare division. In fact, we've spent the last 6 months really helping them understand that there is a significant difference in childcare for young kids versus school age kids. So I would just say, wherever you've got an opportunity to either be aware of funds or encourage people to donate, please do. And thanks for asking.
Yeah, thank you, Helen.
Thank you for the answer, Helen. Jay, you have a question?
Just want to say publicly, Helen, you are doing a great job for our community. And I think if you take tonight's message about not starting again until January, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be looking at saying, now what are we going to do as the weather gets poorer? And so I just appreciate all your efforts, and I hope the community can support you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jay.
Thank you. Any further questions? Well, seeing none, I want to thank you, Helen, and echo the appreciation for the hard work and for your leadership on this. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Take care. Seeing there, hearing no further comments, the public hearing is now closed. With that, I want to mention for community members that the board appreciates and values public input. You can email the board at any time by going to the Crevalle School District website to meet the board. Also, you can sign up for public comments by going to the same platform and signing up for public comments for the next business meeting. With that, the next item on the agenda is enrollment updates. And we have Olivia and Ryan, if you want to introduce the subject.
Yeah, this is a annual report that we have done every year since I've been here, at least, probably well before that. And it's just an opportunity to talk about, now that we're underway, school has started, an assessment of where we are in terms of enrollment, and that enrollment picture, which, as you know, drives our budget and future spending. So that's an important piece for us to keep in mind and to share and look at every year. And so that's what we'll do tonight.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I am sharing my screen, so it's a little tricky because it's hard to see people's faces and see my presentation at the same time. So if you have questions, just use the Zoom app to raise your hand, and I'll kind of let Sammy or Ryan sort of moderate that. Starting just high level and talking about our overall enrollment, where we're at and what it's looked like over the last several years. So the fall enrollment update is a representation of our preliminary number of K-12 students enrolled on the first day of October of each year. So this is an annual report that will eventually become published by Oregon Department of Ed and sort of becomes our official head count for the year. So our preliminary data shows that as of October 1, we had 6,472 students enrolled. This includes all of our schools with the exception of our Yes Health alternative education program. We know that compared to last year, we've seen a decrease of 256 students. We were expecting to see a decline, as most districts around us have seen that as well. The change between this year and last year is about 3.8%. The majority of what we're seeing are students who have elected to choose a homeschool option or a virtual charter school option. So we do get information from the LBL ESD about families who are registered for homeschool, and that number is higher than what it traditionally has been over the last several years. When we look at a longer term picture, we can see that overall, compared to 5 years ago, the enrollment as of last week, again, is lower by about 3.3%. And when we look out 10 years ago, it's actually not that far off from what it looked like 10 years ago. And so you can kind of see the trend of enrollment in the Corvallis School District, where we sort of saw several years of increased enrollment, and now we're sort of in this consistent pattern. Even though it did drop a lot this year, it has been declining for the last 4 years. When we look at what we had projected, so just to clarify, so our projected enrollment was submitted in December of 2019, so almost a year ago. We always project our enrollment in December of the year prior to the school year. And so we built our budget off of these numbers. And so we know that, you know, this projection is pretty old, but it's what our adopted budget is based on. So we pay attention to that because this is how we know if we need to anticipate changes with our revenue. So overall, looking at that same total of 6,472 students, we can see grade by grade, there is a lot of fluctuation at the 12th grade level. For some reason, it came in exactly as projected. So that was kind of weird. But we can definitely see that our primary grades is significantly lower than what we projected. So K5 is less 246 students. Grades 6 through 12 is less 91 students. When we're looking at enrollment by grade, we're also looking to see what kind of education option students selected this year. And so this basically shows the same chart, but it's now split between the hybrid option and the Corvallis online option. So we can see grade by grade, students who chose the hybrid option versus Corvallis online, and it's fairly consistent across all grade levels. There's some fluctuations here and there, but no one grade is significantly lower or higher. Overall, Corvallis online enrollment totals 785 students. It represents about 12.5% of our total enrollment right now. When we look at enrollment by school, and so these would be, so this is by school. So when you look at Adams, for example, these would be students who selected the hybrid education option enrolled at Adams. And so you can see moving across how a lot of our elementary school numbers are lower than what we've traditionally seen. And you can also see, for example, the difference between Sheldon and Linus Pauling is very significant when we look at the hybrid option. So Sheldon at 439, Linus Pauling at 725. So in some cases, we're seeing some big gaps at those levels. And then you can see the Corvallis online enrollment of 785, and then Muddy Creek has enrolled 119 students. And so that's about normal for them. So when we look at the total enrollment, and we're kind of talking by school. Oh, I'm sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, there's a question from Sarah.
Okay.
And this may not be a question for you, but it was something that jumped out at me when I was looking at these numbers before the meeting. And I was seeing these, I was really concerned about Linus Pauling compared to Sheldon if the kids return to their school buildings. And if with those kinds of numbers, we will be able to, even on a hybrid schedule, get kids into buildings and be able to maintain any kind of space.
you want me to take that one?
Sure.
Okay. So as we were working this summer, we weren't sure what to anticipate in terms of Corvallis Online. So in some of our modeling and some of our work around creating cohorts, it was really kind of anticipating all students at the school. And so I don't anticipate that necessarily being a barrier for returning in the cohort model. Again, keeping in mind the cohort model is sort of the 2 day per week in the building model, so about 50% of the students. So I think we'll be okay there. What I'd highlight is that having a program like Corvallis Online as a second option or an additional option for families was something that we took on this year, and I feel really I'm really happy that we did that because we created an option for those families and maintained them with us, and it was something that we had to work really hard to get together, in a short order to make it work. And I think it's moving along, and I think it's made a huge difference long term in our financial viability and also keeping kids connected with us here in CSD.
Thank you.
Okay. So kind of staying in the same lane of enrollment by school, and we know how some of our school enrollments were impacted by students leaving the district and or students maybe choosing the Corvallis Online option. So we also are looking at Corvallis Online enrollment by residence school. So this would be students who elected the Corvallis option who were either enrolled at these schools prior to that, or they're maybe new to the district, chose that option and live in that resident boundary. So this is definitely more inconsistent across schools, and we definitely have seen schools where a much higher percentage of students chose the Corvallis Online option than others. And again, it's just something we're monitoring, it's something we're aware of, and it does factor in, like Sarah's question, it does factor in to some degree when we are talking about reopening plans, because schools have different numbers of hybrid enrollments at this point in time. I saw another hand pop up.
Yeah, that's from Vince.
Yeah,
Vince?
Okay.
yeah, that was me, Olivia. So I'm just seeing a few spikes here, and I just wonder if there's a story, and maybe we don't know yet. But I'm seeing a higher proportion at Sheldon, Wildcat, Husky, and to a certain degree Adams as well. And I just wonder, is there a story there behind those higher proportions on Corvallis Online? You don't know?
For those specific schools, not necessarily. What I would say is we expected to see small numbers of Corvallis Online option for Garfield, for Lincoln, for Linus Pauling, right? Because we knew that we were encouraging families to in the DLI program to choose that hybrid option. And so those numbers are kind of the reason why they're lower than the other schools. And so I don't necessarily, I mean, it would all be anecdotal at this point, but I don't have any specific data points to refer back to as to why we saw some different trends by school.
I was just curious. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's a question from Lou.
Okay.
It's just following up on Vince's question actually about like the story, like data always tells a story. But would that be helpful in knowing at all, like some of the reasons why have families been asked about that at all? When Brian said that families were reached out to about the online program, was that something that was asked about them and about their decisions, and not in a judgy way, but in a like just to kind of understand where there's different situations and different support needs that there may be in the community? It's just kind of something that.
Sure.
Yeah.
One thing I would say, based on what I know about our demographics and our student data, is that the schools where we see a high number of students who chose Corvallis Online are the schools that have our lowest % of students navigating poverty. And so you could make a correlation between those two things, because when I look at the numbers, excluding our DLI schools, there is a correlation there, where with the exception of Jaguar, which generally has a lower percent of students navigating poverty, but had a very low percent of students choosing the Corvallis online option. But other than Jaguar, there is a little bit of a correlation with that statistic.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, another snapshot we like to provide is just sort of tracking school enrollment over time. And we know that some schools experience fluctuations in enrollment, and this kind of tells more of a story about for some of our schools, they have seen more than a 10% fluctuation, either compared to 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So for our elementary schools, and Franklin is in this group because it's K-8, but I'm showing them in the elementary group, but it's all their enrollment K through 8. You can see that for some schools, there's fairly like static numbers, some slight increase every year, some up and down. We historically at Husky Elementary, for the last several years, have seen pretty significant drops. And so not too surprised by the fact that they've had a pretty big change. And Mountain View as well. Mountain View enrollment's been very up and down when you look at the last 10 years, but overall has gotten smaller over the years. And then we're seeing a small change at Franklin. It's primarily their middle school grades where we're seeing less students enrolled than as what we saw 5 or 10 years ago. So this is kind of just highlighting the 3 schools where there's a more than a 10% change. But then you can kind of just see some of them just fluctuate, and it's just something we pay attention to. We sort of recalculate our resource allocations each year. So obviously these are things we sort of keep our eyes and ears on, because as school enrollments increase or decrease over time, there are things outside of the classroom teacher that we monitor to determine what additional supports the schools need.
Awesome.
I
There's
saw
a question from Kate.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering, and like, I don't know if this question is that significant, but in a lot of the schools, there's a couple of exceptions, but it seems like it was going up and then like it kind of either leveled off, or like, I'm just wondering if there's an overall pattern, like were we expecting to keep going and then we didn't this year because of COVID, or is it just kind of like random population fluctuations and it like expected?
Yeah, overall, our district enrollment has been declining. It declined more than what we would have anticipated this year, primarily due to the fact that we're in distance learning. But I would say school by school, we do have certain areas, parts of town, and areas where there's more development versus less. And we've seen how numbers have shifted over time. And so I think it's just something that fairly hard to predict, because we do have a lot of students that enroll in schools that aren't their boundary school. So we know that like at our elementary grades, I want to say, you know, it's a pretty high percentage of students, almost one third, who are enrolled in a school that's not their boundary school. So it's usually, we have to look at students who have been attending and use those numbers to project enrollment versus who lives in the boundary of the school. So a little tricky, but I would say overall declining enrollment, but we do know we have some schools where the enrollment's gone up. And on this next slide with our secondary enrollment, Linus Pauling's an example of a school whose enrollment has gone up steadily over time. And like you can see with Sheldon Middle School, it's kind of gone down a little bit. Same with Crescent Valley going down. Corvallis is, I would call that almost like pretty steady. And so it just kind of depends, but we obviously have feeder schools. And so we can predict, like with Linus Pauling, we can predict that they're going to continue to have higher enrollment and Sheldon will continue kind of to be where they're at. So those are all things that we keep track of. The last slide is just to kind of show, these are just straight student teacher ratios. This isn't necessarily class size. At our elementary level, you can consider it class size because, you know, kids are, you know, cohorted into classrooms. And so for the elementary, this would be class size. For our secondary schools, this is just the number of students divided by the number of teachers. But you can see our ratios are pretty low this year. Obviously, our enrollment's less than what we had projected it to be. We did make some modifications with staffing and we did some shifting. And so, you know, these are really low. The caveat is that it's not going to look like this next year. It's not affordable to have ratios that look like this. But for this year, this is kind of where we sit. It's actually fairly, like for our elementary schools, fairly consistent across the board. So it's nice. We did a lot of scrambling in August to shift staffing to kind of, you know, balance things out and shift staffing to Corvallis Online because we kept seeing that number go up and up. And so you can see these ratios here. One thing I wanted to touch on, I did talk about the enrollment being less than what we projected. There is obviously a revenue impact when that happens. We know that we get paid on the higher of the current or prior year ADMW, average daily membership weighted. And so generally when a school district experiences a decline in enrollment, if their enrollment in the prior year was higher, then the state will pay them on the prior year number. And so what we will be paid on this year is actually our 1920 ADMW. The bummer is that in 1920, we were paid on 1819 ADMW because we've been in declining enrollment. So the revenue impact is estimated to be about $2.7 million because we have 337 students less than what we projected. It's a big number. It's part of a big puzzle we're still working to put together in terms of rebalancing our budget. We still have some work to do. We still have some unknowns that still need to be plugged in. But I did want to be clear that there is a revenue impact to that, where we have projected it to be about $2.7 million. And we're still planning to bring a supplemental budget to the board in December. I anticipate that all of the unknowns will be known by then, and we'll be able to rebalance our budget up.
You have two hands from Jay and then Sarah.
Okay.
First, Olivia, thank you very much for all this data. It's a lot to think about. I just have a kind of a big picture question. Do you ever get from, maybe it's the ESD or someone, a count as to how many students are within our district gross, that is total, so that then we can say, where are those students that aren't in our buildings? Where are they? Do you get that kind of data?
Not formally, no. We've been doing more work than normal this year to keep track of when we are informed. So when a student leaves our district, and let's say they choose to enroll in an online charter school that's sponsored by another school district, most of the time that school notifies us and sends us a notification that they've enrolled a student that lives in our district. There's no system statewide that tracks all of that. But I would say we know of 177 students that live in our district that are currently enrolled in a virtual charter school outside of our district. And we know that there are 306 students that live in our district that are registered through the ESD for homeschool. So the only registration that happens through the ESD is for homeschool. But if students choose to enroll in another district, or it's hard because there isn't really a way to track all of that. It requires a lot of manual follow-up.
Thank you.
Yeah, what I'd add to that is that the conversation we're having right now is a conversation that's happening really district to district all over the state. And one of the things I've noticed about our data that looks a little bit different is the majority going to homeschool rather than to virtual charter, which causes me to think a lot about will those students be coming back to us in the future? Is this a homeschool this year because of what's going on with COVID? And so that's what we're paying close attention to. I also get to facilitate the superintendent group for the 3 regions this year. And so we're meeting next week, and one of the conversations we're having in the group is this specific conversation, because it's something that's on the minds of all superintendents right now.
Thank you. And I would add to that, my understanding, if homeschool students, the money that is lost for not having them is going to redistribute it equally for all other districts. So it's as long as the ratios of the homeschool students going to homeschooling in our districts is not more than others, we're not actually losing money, right?
It depends on the size of the distribution or the pot in future years, but
right.
For all intents and purposes, yeah, that plays into it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. We have, sorry, Jay, do you have more questions? And I apologize for interjecting, but Sarah, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks. I know when we asked families to choose which model of schooling they wanted to do, we sort of said, you need to stay in this for the semester. We're not going to switch people back and forth all the time. But I'm wondering if there's any, especially as we extend the amount of time that the hybrid students are going to be at home, if we're seeing any questions about switching back and forth.
So I had a chance to talk to Byron today, and he has had a couple of queries. And really what we said has been that after the start of school, that any changes would take agreement between the 2 principals, the principal of the homeschool as well as the online principal. And so there needed to be an explanation and a real academic reason, or reason that really behooved the student to make that shift. So those conversations have still been happening. He said he had a couple more today as a result of that decision. But for the most part, what it allows us to do is also to get some feedback on how things are going in either model, and what sorts of accommodations and modifications we need to take into account as well. So sometimes we've made some shifts, but for the most part, it's just allowed us to further fortify and support our programs.
Thanks, Sarah. Vince? Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was just going to say also that, with the whether people come back or not, my totally unscientific, just listening to what people are saying would tell me there are a lot of people, especially with kids in the younger grades, who are homeschooling this year, but if we went back to school next year, they would be likely to put their kids back in school. Of course, they may end up deciding they really like homeschooling, and then all bets are off. But I think there are a lot of families that would be anticipating coming back. So
yeah, that's my sense too. And at the same time, I'm sort of conservative in my approach to that right now. But I think that in most cases that will be the case, will be the outcome long term.
Thanks, Sarah. Any more questions, Sarah? See none. We have Vince.
No, well, I've gotten almost all my questions answered. And really, I mean, for Ryan, after your conversation with your peers, I think the board would love to hear the outcome or what you learned from that. My question here that I have here is, what do we look like to our peer districts, enrollment wise, and how are, what are other districts experiencing? Just really a situational analysis piece. And if you have some information, I'd love to hear it, but you'll probably have more in a week.
Well, but anecdotally, I would say that we're in a better position than some other districts in our region with regards to our numbers, and by ratio or by percentage.
Right. And then this is a question comment. Really, it's just a comment. Olivia, you said this budget cycle, you have to carve out $2.7 million, but, and there's just so much uncertainty looking forward. I'm just thinking about what does the long-term fiscal landscape look like? Both considering our enrollment trends and funding.
Yeah, so we're going to be projecting next year's enrollment starting next month. So that will be a little trickier maybe than normal. And so we might have to apply some strategies to that are different than what we would typically do. I would think we would want to be fairly conservative in our projections to avoid overstaffing, like, developing a budget that is staffed at a higher level maybe than what we would need. And so we'll have to be pretty strategic about how we move forward long term with regard to the state school fund. What I would say for this year, kind of going back to Sammy's comment, a lot of districts have seen a decline in enrollment, but the pie is still the same. The state school funding is still the same, and it hasn't been reduced. And so there's less students maybe in the system, but the pot of money is still the same. So when you divide the assets up, you're getting more per student maybe than what we would have typically seen. So that estimate is really rough because there's a lot of factors beyond our local control. Like what happens at the state level also impacts us as well. And so there's a lot of moving parts. There's also components of the state school fund formula that may look different this year. There will likely be property tax exemptions due to wildfires by multiple counties where they are, exempting property that previously wasn't exempted. There will be a significant change to the amount of the transportation grant because, schools are reimbursed a certain percentage of their transportation expenditures, and a lot of schools are having little to no spending in that area. So there's a lot of things at play with this year still that we just don't know everything yet. Regarding future years, we've been told to expect flat funding in terms of the state school fund. So the current biennial allocation is $9 billion. And we've been told to expect the same allocation for the next biennium. So knowing that, in the last few years, our general fund spending has increased 12, 13, 10%. Flat funding means budget reductions for sure. But it's still kind of too early to determine how much or what that looks like. But we know that state revenues are not going to come in as they were initially projected a year ago. So we're expecting to have to do more budget rebalancing again in the spring.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Olivia.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Vince. We have time for one more question if there is one brief one. See none. Thank you, Olivia, for working on this report. And I know this is not that typical reports by the numbers because we had systems being created and within the last few months and having a full online school up there. So I really appreciate that work on this. I know there's lots of effort, more than the usual, to really put this presentation. So I really appreciate it. And I want to reiterate the volatility and uncertainty in enrollment shouldn't forbid the state from continuing to invest in education. We're still educating our children and making sure we're committed to their learning and wellness. And we will stay there, but we have to be really cautious and mindful about our budget because of those uncertainties. So thank you very much. With that, I want to move to the next item, which is Resolution 1001, authorizing issuance of general obligation bonds. Do we have a presentation or immediately to the question?
Yeah.
Do you want me to introduce this one, Ryan?
Yep.
Okay. So this might, for some of the board members that have been were on the board back in 2018, this might be a little confusing because technically the board has previously adopted a resolution authorizing the issuance of $199.9 million in general obligation bonds. So the reason why this is coming forward is that in August of 18, we only issued 160 million of the total amount that was authorized. So we did a partial issue. The reason for not issuing everything all at once is due to our tax exempt bond post-issuance compliance. So in order for our bonds to be tax exempt, there are several requirements we have to meet. One of those is that you need to commit to spend 85% of the bond proceeds within 3 years of the issuance. And due to the number of projects planned and the scheduling complexities, we knew that it was unlikely that we were going to spend 85% of $199.9 million by August of 2021. So we developed an issuance plan that allowed for a later bond sale while still maintaining our level projected levy rate of $1.98 per thousand of assessed value. So kind of for the board members that aren't as familiar with this process, when the board adopted the long range facilities plan prior to the ballot measure appearing in May 2018, the board's goal was to keep the levy rate below $2 per thousand of assessed value. So all of our financial estimates and all of our planning kind of ties back to that. I would say that what we've experienced, our actual rate in 2018 was $1.95, and then the actual rate in 2019 was $1.86. So our actual rates have been lower than projected because our assessed values have increased more than the assumptions that were used in those estimates. So ultimately, this resolution just provides the terms under which the remaining $40 million will be sold and issued. And so our bond council, even though the board had previously approved a resolution authorizing the full amount to be sold, our bond council recommended coming back with this resolution just to be crystal clear that we're now authorizing the sale of the remaining 39.9% in general obligation bonds. And then the rest of this resolution is really technical, but it's just the official document that allows us to issue the bonds and delegate authority to negotiate, approve, and sign the financial documents for the bond sale. So if you have questions, I can answer those. But I'm reading the room for faces.
Thank you.
So
we do have a question. We have a question from Jay. I'll recognize myself and then Vince. Jay? Jay, you're muted.
Sorry, I wanted you to clarify the propriety of our asking for bonds that exceed the $199 million figure. We've had a couple questions raised as to whether that's a good thing or proper, and maybe you could address that.
So we're not issuing bonds that exceed the amount that voters approved. So voters approved 199.9 million. We previously issued 159.9 million. Now we're going to issue the remainder of that. And so in terms of what voters approved and what the board has authorized, this all ties back to the $199.9 million. I know there's been questions about additional sources of funds. Those types of things are addressed in our bond program management plan. Several additional sources of funding are supporting our bond program and are available to augment the 199.9 million that was approved by voters. That includes things like our bond sale premium, bond interest earnings, the awesome grant, the Oregon School Capital Improvement Matching Grant, which we received for the Lincoln Elementary School project. And then we also receive like energy trust incentives and other energy use incentives. And so there's a lot of additional sources of funding that are augmenting our bond program. But in terms of bonds and actual general obligation bonds, we are not going to be issuing more than 199.9 million.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to say thank you for our students representatives for being here. I know the mark is 8 o'clock, so if you want to stick around, you're more than welcome, but we know you have homeworks and work to do, so feel free to stay early. And thank you for being here. Have a good night. And we have a question from Vince.
So thank you. So my first question is, what's the district's current bond rating? So our Moody's rating, essentially.
So we haven't quite gone through that process yet. So our rating would still be what it was in 2018 when we did the first issue, but we will be having a new one in about a month from now. We'll have a new rating.
Okay, and as I recall, we were double A rated. Was that
Yes.
correct?
There's 2 rating agencies and they're different rate. They have like their own scale. Mm-hmm.
And then
at that time, and at that time, we were one step below the state of Oregon, and they couldn't give us a rating as strong as the state. So
right,
didn't really go any higher.
So I guess my question is, do we expect that we'll probably get a similar rating? Although we may not, considering the fiscal situation that the whole country is in, particularly Oregon.
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about. I mean, I think we'll still have a strong rating. Our fund balance has declined since the first issuance. We've been operating in a deficit. And so, but I would say that the timing of this is a little tricky because our 1920 audit is not complete. And so the financial information will be not as current because our audit won't be released by then. And so I think we'll probably get the same ratings that we had before.
And then my next question is around the timing of the sale. And so, it's the sequencing clearly where, why are we selling now? And then what is the bond market like? Because I'm not following that. So I'm just trying to get to that bond premium question. Is like, how are these bonds going to sell? How is this bond going to sell?
Yeah, those are definitely a lot of conversations we've been having lately, particularly with our bond underwriters. And so we know that the market's been good and it's been good for a while. We know that borrowing rates are low. We sort of set this up to be ready to sell at the end of December. However, we've talked about contingency because we may see some volatility post-election. And so we're going to kind of wait to see how that goes. And we may push into January if we need to. And granted, if it all kind of goes to hell in handbasket, we can always continue to push back and hold on the sale. But our goal is to complete the sale sometime in January, but we're currently looking at the end of December pending any volatility issues that come up. We did, historically, there's been a little bit of that post-election, but it will have been over a month by the time we go out for our sale. So we anticipate that if there is some volatility, that it may be settled by then. But again, really hard to say. We are never guaranteed a bond premium. It's always something we would love to see. And our bond underwriters do a really good job of trying to get, squeeze every penny that we can to put towards our bond projects. So again, it's hard to speculate on that. We're optimistic that we'll see a bond premium. We had such good success last time we sold our bonds. And a bond premium is a good thing. It means we had strong interest in what we were offering. It was partially due to our rating, I'm sure. But we were offering an attractive product to the investor. And so we're optimistic that we'll be able to do the same thing this time.
Yeah, I mean, considering the current state of the world, I would think that investors would be looking for a safe haven for investment, and making, public bond investment seems a really stable choice. Thanks, Olivia.
Yeah. And just one other thing to add is that, bond premium and interest earnings are things that you can't really account for. Interest earnings are not going to do as well now as they would have done a little while ago. So all those pieces are sort of unknown moving into this process. What we do know is we have the ability to sell the remainder of our bonds and to go ahead and move forward in doing that to continue on the projects that we in our bond promises to our voters.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vince. Any further questions? Seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion on the subject.
My hand is up. I'll make the motion.
All right. What's your motion?
I move that resolution number 20-1001 be adopted to authorize the issuance, sale, and delivery of general obligation bonds, designate an authorized representative, and delegate the negotiation and approval of financial documents and related matters.
Second.
Was the second from Sarah?
Sounded like it.
Awesome. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we will be entering into a vote. Therese, what's your vote?
In favor, yes.
Sarah?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Vince?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Passes unanimously. Congratulations. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. Thank you. And
It's exciting.
it's very exciting work, and I appreciate the questions from board members. It clarifies what we're doing, and we're very excited to really continue this commitment for safe and good schools that will serve for our lifetimes and hopefully beyond. Thank you.
And so we'll take that message back to the Bond Oversight Committee that Jay serves as the liaison to.
Nice. Good. Our next resolution is the resolution 20-1002, Indigenous Peoples Day. And this is the second reading, and it's offered for the board for an action. I would either entertain a motion or for the author of the resolution, Director Louis White-Bear, to speak about the motion. Either one is okay. Lou, you are recognized if you want to.
Sure. I'll just share a couple of things really quick as we are getting ready to vote on this. And I just wanted to say that Indigenous histories are part of our shared histories. Indigenous histories predate this nation and have continued to be part of this nation since its inception. For Indigenous people, Indigenous Peoples Day is every day, but as a recognized day by all, we are able to say it a little louder so we, as living Indigenous people, remind in the minds of all in the present. Far too often we are viewed as relics of the past and a tragic tale of what once was. In reality, we represent thousands of beautiful cultures with numerous historic and present day contributions to society. As we, as board members, consider the Indigenous Peoples Day resolution this evening, we consider all of this while recognizing the depths of the impact this action can make in the community with the students in our schools and their families, however that is defined for them, as well as the teachers, staff, and administrators. Honoring Indigenous people and honestly portraying how Indigenous people have been historically depicted is a necessary step towards more equitable systems and social justice in our district. And that's what I had to share with you all for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Vince, you're up next.
Would the chair entertain a motion?
What's your motion?
I move to approve resolution 20-1002, Indigenous Peoples Day.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Therese. And is there any further discussion on the motion? Vince.
I want to once again thank Lou Whitebear for bringing this resolution forward. I think for our community, I think this is, we are really just catching up to our community. The reality is that even in my circle of friends, and this is me speaking as a white man, I don't know anybody who celebrates Columbus Day. I can't think of anyone. So for all the reasons that Lou just stated, I think this is it's a small step, but I think it's an important step of moving towards reversing what has happened to Indigenous people since colonialism landed on this continent. So I'm excited to vote yes for this resolution and take this small step and continue doing work like this. So thank you, Lou Whitebear, and thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you, Vince. Sarah?
Yeah, I want to echo Vince's appreciation to Dr. Whitebear for her efforts to bring this to us. I think this is, as Vince also said, catching up. I also think it's a great indicator of why it's important to have different voices on a board, because the white folk on this board may not have come around to this. And so having someone say this is really important to our community, I think is a really valuable thing. And it's why we need to have lots of different voices and perspectives on boards. So thank you both for this resolution and for serving on the board.
Thank you, Sarah. Any further inputs? See none. I would want to comment and say this is a great opportunity for us and it's a commitment. And one thing I want to highlight about this resolution, thank you, Lou, for having this resolution as a proclamation for the second Monday of October of this month, but also it's a proclamation for the second Monday of October for following years. It's a commitment from us to continue this important work and be persistent and sustain it. So I appreciate that. And without further ado, let's make a vote unless there's any last minute comments. So let's go for a vote. And I would like to ask Lou, what's your vote?
Aye.
Tina, what's your vote?
Aye.
Jay, what's your vote?
Aye.
Vince, what's your vote?
Aye.
Therese, what's your vote?
Aye.
Sarah, what's your vote?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Passes unanimously. And for the significance of this resolution, I will be reading it aloud and it will be signed during this meeting if there's no objection. Corvallis School District 509J, resolution number 20-1002, acknowledgement of Indigenous Peoples Day. Whereas Christopher Columbus, a man who is inaccurately described as having discovered the Americas, came upon land that was already inhabited by Indigenous peoples. And whereas Columbus' voyage to the Americas led to the introduction of transatlantic slavery, land disposition, and genocidal acts against Indigenous peoples. And whereas the city of Corvallis and current day Benton County are on lands fully inhabited by the Kalapuya people before removal for settlers. And whereas education is necessary component for creating a more equitable and anti-racist community, nation, and world. And whereas the Corvallis School District has made a commitment to equity and anti-racism, and whereas the Corvallis School District has an opportunity to uniquely reach and educate children to touchstone in the community. And whereas the Corvallis School District has a responsibility to honor and respect the diverse histories of our communities. And whereas the Corvallis School District recognizes and acknowledges the significant contributions made in our community by Indigenous people and commits to ensure greater understanding of these contributions by all students through Oregon Senate Bill 13 curriculum. And whereas the idea of Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations to the United Nations. And whereas the state of Oregon does not formally recognize Columbus Day, and whereas the city of Corvallis has proclaimed the second day of October as Indigenous Peoples Day in Corvallis since 2015, and whereas the state of Oregon has proclaimed the second day of October as Indigenous Peoples Day in Oregon since 2017, whereas this day should be recognized for the Indigenous peoples of the Americas. Therefore, let it be resolved by the Board of Education of the Corvallis School District, do hereby proclaim Monday, October 12, 2020, as well as the second Monday of October annually as Indigenous Peoples Day in the district, and strongly encourage families, staff, and community members to join in existing local Indigenous Peoples Day celebrations, and encourage all schools in the district to help highlight this day in great appropriate ways, as well as highlight the contributions of Indigenous peoples to the local community, nation, and beyond, both historically and in current times. Adopted this day, October 8th, 2020. Signed, Samia Lapropo, Board Chair, attested by Ryan Nass, Superintendent. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, everybody. Congratulations. All right, any further comments? Next on the item is approve edits to 2020-21 board norms documents. Oh, sorry.
Resolution 20-1003.
I passed one resolution, so never mind. Let's go for resolution 21003, tax loss boundary adjustments.
For the Paloma School Board would have been unhappy.
That's true. So with that, this is a reminder. This is a second reading on a resolution that was presented to us last meeting regarding changing a tax loss boundary adjustment from Corvallis school district boundary to Philomath School District boundary. Ryan, would you like us to go for the questions right away, or are there?
Sure. Yeah, I think the only thing I'd highlight, we spoke about this at the last board meeting, and since that time I've been in conversation with the superintendent there in Philomath, letting her know about our progress with this. So I feel like she's been informed along the way. So with that, I would recommend approving this change based on the location and proximity to the schools in Philomath.
Thank you. Jay and then Vince. Jay, you are muted.
I'm sorry. I'd like to go ahead and make the motion. I move to approve Resolution 20-1003 tax lot boundary adjustment.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved by Jay and seconded by Vince. Jay, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. I just have simply said that we've done the right analysis. We are going to do the balancing of the dollar amount owed between the two districts, and it makes absolute sense. So thank you.
Thank you. Vince?
Yeah, I would just like to once again express my appreciation to the district and the superintendent for a very, this is a complex issue and it's tricky. And I appreciate the clarity in the way that this process is unfolded. And so I'm able to vote in favor of this, with confidence.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? I'll just reiterate what was said and say this is the best, this is a good decision, fiscally responsible decision, and also is the best for the children and also for both districts. So I really appreciate working collaboratively with Philomath School District on this. Thank you. Seeing there is no further discussion, we will go for a vote on Resolution 20-1003 tax lot boundary adjustments. And let's go with Sarah.
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Therese?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Vince?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
And I vote aye, passes unanimously. All right, thank you very much. Next is approve edits to 2020-21 board norms documents. And do we have any presentation or discussion around the edits?
Yeah, so we're bringing forward tonight 3 documents: the board norms, the superintendent and board working agreements, and also the board goals. Because the other 2 had some modifications, we felt like it would be good just to bring all 3 documents to get up separately. And so the first one, being the board norms, doesn't have any modifications to it, but rather than put it in the consent agenda and the other 2 up above, we just thought it would be good just to verify on all 3. So that's probably the question that you're all wondering.
All right, I see Vince's hand. Is it up from, do you want to speak on this? Never mind. Seeing none, I would like to entertain a motion.
I move to approve the changes to the 2021 board working agreements document.
All right, and do I hear a second?
Second.
I second.
I heard Lou first. So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, so seeing there's no further discussion, let's go for a vote. Vince?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Therese?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
And I vote aye, passes unanimously. All right, next is approving edits to 2020-21 board working agreements documents.
All right, so for this one, team, what I did was listening to the conversation from the meeting. There was quite a bit of deliberation around communication, and specifically around the language, both in terms of the board chair and the role of the board chair in communication, and also board members' ability to respond after the board chair, but not necessarily being obligated to do so. So the language for you to review is highlighted in green. And really what it does, when a single board member receives a communication, okay, so that one is basically identifying as a single board member, the board member may respond to the patron and may also elect to forward it on to the full board. So again, highlighting that piece.
Mhm.
Down below in number 5, there's a second component, and that was one that was brought up by Vince. And in that instance, it was to highlight the superintendent or designee can schedule times for a maximum of 3 board members. So not meeting a quorum to meet with the superintendent or designee for information sharing sessions and questions. It's important to note that the questions don't lead to deliberation towards a decision, and that if there's questions that are answered, that they're forwarded on and shared with the full board. So that's another modification that was made.
Mhm. Thank you. And Ryan, I want to highlight number 5. I really appreciate that addition. And I want to highlight my understanding. This is what we've been doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. But it was, again, it was one of those conversations. Jay had quite a bit of, was involved in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Again, sort of highlighting when I get an email as a board member, you know, how do I do that as a single board member
Mm-hmm.
versus the clarity around the role of the board chair. So again, just trying to provide greater clarity to the community as a whole.
Perfect. Yeah, I really like the clarity. Vince, your hand's up.
I just really appreciate the language that the superintendent came back with on number 5 there. You know, the board working collaboratively with the superintendent and staff is critically important for the governance team to be effective. And so I think this is an important practice, and it's good to have it codified here.
Yeah, thank you for the suggestion. It's really good to have it clear. Any other comments? Seeing none, the chair entertains a motion on the subject. Vince, what's your motion?
I move to approve the changes to the 2020-2021 board working agreements document.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
I heard Tina first. And is there any further discussion or any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we will go to a vote. Jay?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Therese?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Vince?
Aye.
And I vote aye, passes unanimously. All right. One more document. So I just want to say thank you. This is really a great document. It's helped me as I joined the board. It's helped me communicate with community members about how the board functions and their responsibilities and relationship with the superintendent. So they're really great documents, and I look forward to continue sharing them with constituents to clarify our role. The next document is also as important, is approving edits to the 2018-23 board goals documents. I know there are some really important additions. If you, Ryan, want to explain them and present them.
Sure. So there are 4 changes to this document. The first one is identifying gender identity and gender expression in each goal listed below. So that was the first modification. The second one was a recommendation from Dr. Whitebear, moving the language from does not to should not predict, and a personal experience with that language as a parent and parent in the school district. So that's the second modification. The third modification under goal 2 equitable systems, this was language encouraged and supported by Jay, and that was to add language that says increase and support school staff and administrative empowerment in leadership in our schools. And I think that has a nice connection to the statement that was shared tonight. So I appreciate Jay's thoughtfulness in bringing that forward. And finally, we added for the 2021 year goal, so it's identified as 2021 goal in response to COVID-19. So as a school district, we'll adapt to new conditions presented by the COVID-19 pandemic and make decisions focused on health and safety as the first priority, student achievement, and equitable systems and in-person resumption. In terms of strategies, some of the strategies we've actually talked with you about or have presented to you, but I think it helps to, as an outward-facing document, communicate to the community those key components. The first one is implementing the operational blueprint aligned with the current educational delivery model. So currently in distance learning. Second, support the work and recommendations of the CSD rapid development teams. We came and presented to you with the lead of each of those rapid development teams in August. So continuing to move those recommendations forward. Provide ongoing communication with staff, students, and the community. An example of that would be the communication that went out yesterday. Utilize new resources, as an example, federal relief funds, in ways that prioritize health and safety and align with the district's instructional priorities. So again, as resources become available or made available from the federal government or other sources, that those are put into place to help us to move forward. And finally, identify and support areas of system development, which support resumption and the next normal. Again, I think that that's important because we need to continue to think and plan around resumption, but also recognize that it's not necessarily going to go back to status quo or the way things were. And so that's where the language of next normal comes from, and recognizing that this is something we're going to be at for quite some time, even with a vaccine and some of those other pieces. There'll still be things that need to be taken into account around health and safety for quite some time. So those were the changes that I made based on what I heard in terms of deliberation from the board at our last meeting.
Thank you, Ryan. I do have the first question from Lou, or comments. Lou?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for adding those pieces in with the gender identity and gender expression, and also changing the wording, because it means something different, and it recognizes that we're not there yet as a district, like we talked about heavily last time. And so I appreciate the acknowledgement of that, and also like the follow through and trying to get there as well through the actions. And also the next normal part that you just like thoroughly explained. I appreciate you pointing that ahead of time to everyone, that like things are probably going to not look like how it was exactly before. And that's a really like important thing for us all to keep in mind as community, that it can't be exactly how it was, because there's been so much shifting and a lot that's going to need to get caught up on, and not just with the health piece, but also like with the schooling as well, with kids who may not be in the place where they hope they would be. And so I just wanted to appreciate that recognition too, about normal may not be what we used to think it was.
Yeah, thank you, Lou. Very good comments. Jane?
I just want to add, thank you very much for the capturing of the sentiments that I think expressed. You did a good job. I just have a question for the group, and that is that in goal 6, if and Lou raised this nicely last week or last time, that these strategies are things that maybe the public looks at and we should sure look at. So maybe my wording is not needed, but one of the things that I think might be added to that very first sentence is that we need to put all of that work in the context of state guidelines and mandates. Otherwise, someone who reads this might say, well, why aren't you guys working on it? I mean, we've all gotten the same emails. why don't you guys make certain decisions? And I don't know whether we have always the state of Oregon sitting over the top of our work, so it's implied everywhere, or whether it would be helpful to add wording such as within the context and guidance of the state of Oregon mandate. I'm just throwing out the question and how we use these strategies as guidance for the next 2, 3, 4 years. If it's not helpful to the public to know that it's not something that we have absolute control on. Just a question more than anything.
Yeah, very good question, Jay. Thank you. And Vince, I'll keep your hands up for the next thing, but I'll say anyone wants to answer or discuss this question from Jay. I'll share my thoughts. I think as soon as you mentioned what you said, Jay, I thought about what do you call it? Accidental sentence in the, or what, I don't know what they call it, the comma, something, comma. So you say something in terms of while complying with the requirements or with the limitations that we are operating within. So basically we need to achieve the goals that we want to do, and we want to do this while complying with the requirements and the mandates and limitations presented to the district. The operating, yeah, so just to rephrase what you mentioned, I think it's really important, whether it is within the goal or the spirit of the goal, we really are clear what is under our control, small circle, what is under our influence, a little bit larger circle, and so much bigger circle or universe, which is not in our control or our influence. And we want to be in our goal very focused in the boundary of we can control what we can control. So I really appreciate what you said, and I think that would be good to note. Vince?
Yes, I'm offering a friendly amendment then at the, so I would suggest letting the first sentence read, as the school district adapt to the new conditions presented by the COVID-19 pandemic, and then I would add, comma, and public health requirements.
So could you read it as it would read after being amended?
As a school district, adapt to new conditions presented by the COVID-19 pandemic and public health requirements.
Period.
Period.
Okay. If you don't mind, before we go put it as a motion, I would like to ask, go for a discussion on it, maybe with a thumbs up and thumbs up, thumbs in the middle. We want to discuss this. Thumbs down. I don't like it. All right. And I want to, if Tina or Therese, if you want to speak to, if you want to discuss, let me know.
I'm a thumbs up.
Okay.
I am too.
I can restate it in the form of a motion if you'd like.
Yes. If you don't mind, I want to ask Ryan, you're good with that?
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. Yes, go for it. What's your motion?
Lindsay, do you have that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So may it please the board, I move that we amend the 2018-2023 board goals, goal number 6, the first sentence to read, as a school district, adapt to the new conditions presented by the COVID-19 pandemic and public health requirements.
All right. Do I hear a second?
Second it.
All right. Any discussion on it? All right. The chair will entertain a unanimous consent on this motion without any objection. Oh, sorry. Go for it, Sarah. There's something you want to say? Oh, there's 2 hands. Yes. Vince and Sarah. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think basically I think it's great. I think requirements is a little squishy because I think we need to talk about mandates or something a little firmer than that, that these are things that we are mandated to follow. It's not just like we should all be wearing masks, which we should be all wearing masks, but I think we need to make it clear that those requirements are things that we have to follow, that they're not just, like the CDC suggesting that people wear masks.
Thank you, Sarah. Any comments on that or discussion? Lou?
Can we make friendly amendments to the motions?
I would say there's no friendly amendments, but you can move, and if there's no objection, the motion will go forward.
If I say this part?
Yeah, you can go for it.
It would just be to put as mandated by the state at the end of what Vince said, just following up with what Sarah said. So it would be like as mandated by the Oregon Health Authority or ODE, however you want to word that, but like as mandated by the state.
Okay.
I don't know if it needs to say /federal because but I know we're following this. We are under the purview of the Oregon Department of Education and Oregon Health Authority at this point with those requirements that we're following in those mandates. So that's why I offered by the state instead of filling out every entity.
All right, just to clarify, Lindsay, could you read the original motion, and then I'll ask you, Lou, to read how it would read after we change it. So the original motion reads as?
Director Adams said that the motion would be, as a school district, adapt to the new conditions presented by the COVID-19 pandemic and public health requirements.
Okay.
And Jay seconded, Director Conroy seconded that.
Wonderful. And Lou, how would the final sentence read with your motion or amendment?
What was I can't like verbatim remember what Lindsay said, but it's just adding on as mandated by the state.
I can read it.
Thanks,
I've been taking notes.
Go for it.
So including Director Whitebear's amendment to my amendment, this first sentence would read, as a school district, adapt to the new conditions presented by the COVID-19 pandemic and public health requirements as mandated by the state.
Capture that. All right, so I'll have that as Lou's motion, and do I hear a second on it?
Second it.
All right, any discussion? Lou? Okay, so seeing no further discussion, we will be voting on the amendment to the main motion. Basically, the change that Lou suggested on Vince's original sentence. If there is no objection, we will have a unanimous consent on the amendment. The amendment passes. Now on the original motion, Vince, could you state the sentence as it would read, which is exactly what you read.
So my amendment has been amended. So the sentence would read, the first sentence of goal 1 would read, as a school district, adapt to the new conditions presented by the COVID-19 pandemic and public health requirements as mandated by the state.
Wonderful. And that was a motion on the table, the amended motion on the table. Is there any further discussion on it? Seeing none, if there is no objection, it will pass with unanimous consent. Passes. So now we are back to the board goals. Thank you, Vince. And the board goals has been amended with the sentence that we just read from goal 6. Is there any further discussion on the board goals? Vince?
I would like to make a motion unless someone needs to clarify.
No, I think, yeah, there's any clarifications or questions? No. What's your motion?
I move to approve the changes to the 2018-2023 board goals document. I'm sorry, I can't read. It's the pandemic.
All right. Do I hear a second?
Second it.
All right, and just as a clarification, the motion is on the edits as amended. And is there any discussion on the motion? See none, we will take a vote. Tina, what's your vote?
Aye.
Lou, what's your vote?
Aye.
Therese, what's your vote?
Aye.
Sarah, what's your vote?
Aye.
Vince, what's your vote?
Aye.
Jay, what's your vote?
Aye.
And I vote aye. All right, we have 6 girls, and I really appreciate the work on this. It provides a really good laser-focused clarity on what we're doing through this really difficult time.
Yeah, thank you. And I feel good about having all of those revised and brought forward tonight to, again, just to clarify and solidify those pieces for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and I want to highlight my appreciation for the comments and amendments throughout today and last week. They've been very valuable. And this document will continue to be guiding the board and the district. With that, the next item on the agenda is consolidated action. As a reminder, the items under this portion of the agenda are for action. Does anyone have a question about anything in consolidated action? And let's start with pulling out any items you want to discuss or ask questions about first. Lou? Lou, what items do you want to speak about?
Oh my gosh, I thought I pressed unmute. JHH, sorry.
All right, JHH, student suicide prevention. Anything else? All right, so Lou, what's your questions or comments?
Yeah, I was just pulling it out for clarification on the action requested. There's a note in here about the conversation follow-up from the September 10th. And it says, provide clarity on why the term completed suicide is used as opposed to other nationally recognized terminologies such as died by suicide. And there's a response that says, please change the vocabulary to died by suicide. Both phrases are acceptable and used in national documents, but it wasn't changed in the sheet. And I didn't know if it needed to be before. Like, was that note supposed to still stay in here for us to pass it, or was it supposed to be changed? That was my question.
Yeah, thank you. Ryan or Joe Lycombe, would you like to answer it?
Or Erica for that matter. Yeah, so 2 things. First, Joe wanted to come tonight or be available tonight if there were questions related to this particular conversation and discussion. So I want to make sure that Joe has a little space to share, and also so let's start with that, if that's okay.
Thanks, Ryan. Sammy, is this an appropriate time to speak?
Please, yeah.
Thanks. So specifically to that question, our response was just to the question that was asked. We're happy to adjust the document to reflect that, Dr. Whitebear. That's certainly something we intended to do, but we didn't want to adjust the document without seeing the final conversation from the board. And then the second part is I hope to take a moment to expand on our response to number 5 related to identifying high-risk groups for suicide, if I might.
Absolutely. And just to highlight, you're talking about the cover page for GHH.
Correct. Thank you. In our response, I think that we indicated that we're developing a process for this, and something I want to highlight in relation to specific suicide prevention processes for LGBTQ youth, Native youth, Black, Latinx, and Asian students is that this is not something that we currently have in our policy to an adequate degree. I feel compelled to make sure that I highlight that, not to show deficiency in our program, but to state that really the status of suicide prevention work across the state and nationally, as it is in a professional domain, does not address these particular subpopulations adequately enough. Areas where there are specific programs that have shown evidence to do this are few and far between in the larger mental health field. In fact, cultural groups, tribes being a notable exception to this, often provide suicide prevention work to their subpopulations much better than the larger mental health community. This is something that in discussion with Chris Hawkins, who's carried a lot of this work for some time, we don't feel is adequate for our program and is not the bar we want to set. I felt compelled to make sure that I spoke that truth. And Dr. Whitebear, I know that you brought up this question at the last board meeting. And I felt compelled to say that to you directly, to say that we're not where we need to be. And our goal is to improve that process. And it will take us some time to implement that.
Thank you. Lou, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, thank you. Because that was the other one I was going to ask about on here. I was just doing that one first and then that one, because the way it's written right now is that the district's existing process identifies those needs, and without even being able to like address them, how are they being identified specifically for those populations is where that comment was coming from originally. So that would be something like, I don't know if that's like a accurate portrayal of what's happening to word it like that. Thank you for your honesty on that, and just the recognition across the board of the disparity in the mental health area, because it is. And then when you add on like multiple identities, like knowing that the like Indigenous youth and the LGBTQ community are actually the highest risk and numbers and stuff like that. And so like when you add in the multiple identity pieces, it's even more compounded. And so I appreciate your bringing that in.
The one other part that I would like to say is I would certainly value any connection, Dr. Whitebear, that you would like to help us forge with communities that are doing this work in a culturally embedded sense. I think that this is a space where we in the mental health program would really welcome contributions from the board and the connections that you're able to forge.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you. Any other comments from Lou or other board members? With that, my understanding, Lou, your suggestion is died by suicide, and districts want to get the direction from the board regarding died versus.
We're just willing to make that change.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't think we need guidance. I think we're
good to go.
Yeah.
Okay. And would you like us to pull it out so the change is implemented and we vote on it next time?
I'd like you to vote on it this time because we're happy to make that modification to it.
Okay.
Under the understanding that that's what we're doing.
Okay. So
Yeah.
with that, probably I'll entertain a motion to make that change. So we have an action that's the decision on the policies as amended by died by suicide, right?
Yep.
Okay. Lou?
Yeah, I just wanted to, like, for people that weren't here for that last meeting, explain like the lean towards that by like other mental health professionals and trainings too, about like helping people understand that this is like a final and real thing that happens, and like using completed is kind of similar to like to what was the other one, the old one, sorry, I'm like, it's getting late. Completed is similar to committed, where it's like something you commit to and you finish. And so that's where the rationale behind that request came from for folk that weren't here for that other conversation. So
Thank you, Lou. Honestly, as a bilingual, I struggled with understanding the difference. And I find that your suggestion makes better sense for me as a bilingual speaker who speaks both English and Arabic. And yeah, I can relate to it and understand it better. So I really appreciate this suggestion and change. With that, I want to ask if there is any motion on the consolidated action with the understanding that JHH will be approved as amended by changing the terminology as discussed. Vince.
I move to approve consolidated action with the amendment as suggested.
Thank you. Any second?
A second.
And that was Sarah, right? Awesome. So we have a motion on the floor by Vincent, second by Sarah. Do I hear any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll enter into a vote. Therese, what's your vote?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Vince?
Aye.
And I vote aye, passes unanimously. Awesome, thank you. Thank you, Joe, for the explanation and discussion.
Thank you
Next
for the time.
item on the, thanks, I appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is non-licensed consolidated information. As a reminder, the items under consolidated information of the agenda are for discussion. Would anyone like to discuss an item in consolidated information?
My hand is still up.
All right, Lou? Lou, you're muted.
I keep clicking the wrong spot. So like it's either leaving the hand up or yeah, JBN, JBA.
All right, JBN and JBA. Federal law, Title 9, sexual harassment complaint procedure. And is there any other things that we want to pull out? Vince?
I have a question on financials.
Financials. All right, let's go for the policy. Is the question on financials brief?
Kind of.
All right, let's go for financials first. If Lou, you're okay with that.
I went with policy.
You want to go for policy?
No, I'm teasing.
All right. Just to Olivia. All right, Olivia, Vince, what's your question on financials?
So Olivia, I was reading the financials and it occurred to me that these financials are based on the budget that was adopted in May. Is that correct?
Yes,
So,
like the budget column, yes.
yeah. So as we read these financials, how should the board think about them? And when can we expect? Well, I guess we have to wait until the supplemental budget before these financials become more solid and more indicative of the fiscal situation of the district.
I would focus on the projected column, because the projected column likely reflects what the budget would look like if we were to make those changes today. And so I would focus mostly on that right now. You'll notice that when you look at total spending projected compared to adopted budget, it's a really low percent compared to what we typically do. And that's because we anticipate that the budget will actually be reduced.
Right.
And so the spending, once the budget's adjusted, then things kind of get straightened out. So yeah, it's really hard right now. And even this time of year, it's just tricky because there hasn't really been a lot of activity at all. So.
And it's, because of what I do for a living now, I realize how privileged our board is because we have an outstanding staff. And this is a situation where if I was in a different district, I might have a much higher index of anxiety about the understanding of the fiscal state of the district. But, you have consistently demonstrated, transparency and great information for this board and for the district, and have managed our finances brilliantly. So while I understand that there's a lot of uncertainty, our financials lag. These are August financials. We still are facing a lot of assumptions right now. I just really appreciate your performance and the service you provide this board, and so I'm not anxious, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I will just reiterate, because I say this during budget committee meetings all the time. The budget is just a plan. It is a plan of what we think, how we're going to spend our money, but it isn't by no means represents our actuals or our projections, because we know that it all changes. So this is evidence of why the budget simply represents a plan and not necessarily the current reality.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to echo Vince's remarks. Thank you, Olivia, and the outstanding performance of how we develop our budgets. speaks for themselves, and we got awards because of that. So I really appreciate the work that you do, and the excellence in developing the plan with the understanding. Life is very volatile, but having good planners and good way of presenting our plans helps a lot and takes away that anxiety, as Vince mentioned. Appreciate it. So next item on the agenda, is there any further questions on financials? See none. GBN, JBA, AR, Federal Law Title IX, Sexual Harassment Complaint Procedure. Lou, what's your questions?
I just wanted to thank whoever put it together for answering the question. I don't know if it was Melissa or Erica or who it was that put the answer in there, but about the federal law about things not occurring in the district's education program activity as a form of dismissing it from the Title IX investigation. The clarity around that doesn't mean the district should stop and dismiss the investigation, I think was a really important clarification, because it shows that that doesn't mean people can just get away with things. It's showing that it will still continue. So I just appreciated that clarity, and it was really helpful considering the new Title IX stuff is pretty interesting. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lou. Vince?
He's
okay.
good.
Okay. Is there any further questions or comments? See none, we're done with consolidated information. And next thing is, do any board members have comments to share? Vince, and then Sarah.
No, can we go back and talk about policy DA? And more importantly, the cover?
Absolutely. Policy DA, fiscal policies.
So this is the problem that I'm having, and so this is a problem with Board Book Premier. I can't see all my notes at the same time, so I have to go item by item by item. So I'm kind of hodgepodge here. I apologize. So on Olivia, on the cover sheet for policy DA, you have this example policy DBDB from OSBA. Are you suggesting that we consider this? And okay, you're shaking your head. Okay, so that confirms my understanding. I didn't see a need for it. I was just curious why it was included.
It's just to demonstrate like the kind of research and the work that we do to look at our policy to see what else is out there. It's just a way we measure our policy against whether it's an OSBA template or other district policies or things like that.
Yeah, it looks like we incorporate the function of policy DBDB into our policy DA.
Yeah, we do. And our policy is much more robust and includes more things besides what's in the sample policy.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Olivia. And next is Sarah.
Yeah, I'm gonna apologize. There's some very noisy going to bed happening at my house. So if there's noise in the background while I talk, I apologize. Missed the boardroom. So yeah, so for board comments, I had a couple thoughts I wanted to share. One, you can't read my necklace. It says vote. There's an election coming up. Everyone should vote. That's how we have a voice. That's how we impact things. I care more about that you vote than anything else. I also think it's a really important example to set for our kids. At our house, I photocopy our ballots and we all sit down and read the voter pamphlet together and vote. My 10-year-old was reading the voter pamphlet last night. And it's also a time when we need to think about the civility that we treat each other with. Because that's really key, that we need to be able to differ politically and still treat each other with respect. And that's also an important example to set for our kids. So please remember that as we get closer and closer to casting our ballots. The other thing I want to express is that the decision to keep our schools remote is, I'm gonna just, that's enough for me right now.
Thank you, Sarah.
It is the first time I've ever heard somebody say they missed the boardroom, so.
All right. I can get back to you if the storm settles down. So, all right, so Jay, next.
I just wanted to say that tonight's vote on the Indigenous Peoples resolution for me was maybe one of my most proudest votes. And part of it is, and I started to reflect about why does it touch me so much? And I think someone made a comment, I'm not offended, but someone said that some of us who are white folks maybe need to understand more. And I just wanted to give a little personal sharing. My father happened to be born in Montana, but moved to the town or area called Modoc Point near Chiloquin, and went to school K-8 in a school system that was had a lot of Indigenous people. I happened to play in a high school football, basketball, baseball situation where I knew a lot of students, Willie Anderson and Art Ochoa and Sandy Miller, who were Indigenous. And they are really neat, nice people and big part of my life. And the last part was that as a history teacher, somehow I was inspired. I don't claim much credit, but the first exercise that I had my history students do was to go back 3 or 4 generations and talk to their parents about 3 or 4 generations back to instill in them, I didn't say this because you never get away with it, but to instill in them some awareness of their roots. And what happened invariably was the roots of the whole class became much more apparent and much more part of our, almost a family. And frankly, it knocked down who lived in what house today, and we all have roots. And so I just want to say thank you to the authors and the gift of that Indigenous. I think it's going to be a big deal. I kind of wish every student had in some ways a roots day that they could think about, but this is a really, really good and important part. So thank you very much, and for letting me kind of share my white background that I think has lots of, I think, appreciation for what this is about. So thank you.
Thank you, Jay, for sharing. Up next is Lou.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate that. I just wanted to say that since I'm right after you, what you said, and I always talk to the students in my class too about things like that, about like we all have histories and we all have stories and they connect somehow. And there's a lot of power when we trace back our ancestors in restoring those connections and understanding our shared histories. It can be very beautiful, and it can be really freeing for people and understanding where we're all from and stuff. And so I just wanted to underscore what you said with that, and also related to the Indigenous Peoples Day. It is a big deal, even though some people are like, oh, it's just like they already do it in Oregon or they already do it in Corvallis. But like for a school district to make a commitment annually like that it is a big deal, and it's really important. And just to share, my older kids were in here listening to that whole conversation and heard you read it, Sammy, and it just means a lot to families, I'm sure, besides my own in the district. And so just wanted to share that too, that they were in here too. And so yeah, and then there was something that I wanted to correct myself earlier and say that, sorry, Erica, I totally was reading the second page and didn't look on the front page of saying whoever said that it was Erica. So thank you for that clarification on that GB and GBA cover sheet. And sorry for not noticing that earlier. And something that Jay said earlier too about the Oregon Health Authority mandates and how we can't circumvent those. I wanted to reiterate that too and remind people that you can exercise your voice to folk that are in those positions, that there's nothing that we as a school board can do to overturn anything that is mandated by the state. And if folk want to email us to vent, that's okay too, but know that there's some things we can't do anything about, and that's one of them. And the last thing I wanted to say was, there was two more things actually. One of them was some of the anti-racist curriculum that was going around. I'm not sure if it's being applied in the same way in the schools, and that's something I'm kind of curious about, and seeing how it was, how there was a little bit of a halt of it at one of the schools for some reason or the other, and hoping that that comes back, and understanding that it's an important and necessary conversation, and considering we're in a district that is committed to trans inclusion and to anti-racism, that those conversations have to start somewhere and they need to continue. And so I hope to, I'm not sure when it's going to come back, but it will to that school. And the school packets that got picked up yesterday at Lincoln in particular, I'm sure they're at other schools too, but you can just totally tell the love that's put into those. And I wanted to appreciate all the teachers and staff that dedicated all those hours to stuffing little packets and putting the kids' names on them, and to Erin for Principal Hell out there, like waving at everybody and just really enthusiastic, and the brisk morning at 8:30 a.m. And so I just wanted to thank everybody for putting a lot of effort into those packs for the kids, because it's exciting for them too. And so, yeah, that's all I'll quit with the airtime.
Thank you, Lou. I do have a hand up from Vince. Has it been from before, or do you have a comment?
I have a couple comments.
Okay.
So first is an appreciation. So the board has seen some emails come in around the Oregon Department of Education's new rule, all students belong, and around the use of the word swastika. And so I want to express appreciation to the board chair and to the superintendent for stepping into that space very quickly and connecting those people to ODE, so that there can be a rule adjustment. And so the background, so the public understands, the swastika symbol has a long history in human societies going back millennia. And while the Nazi Party in Germany borrowed it for a short time, that is not, the full meaning of that symbol. And it has great relevance to people of Hindu faith and of Buddhist faith. And so it's a situation that, and it's a good lesson learned, that even when we're most well-intentioned, we have to be inclusive in our processes as we step into this anti-racist work, to make sure that all the right voices are at the table, and so that harm isn't done even when we're acting with good intention. So thank you for moving swiftly to connect those people, and I'm sure that ODE will move swiftly to move back into a rulemaking process to make the changes.
Yeah, can I share something about that?
Yeah, you bet.
So we are working to schedule a listening session with those past students, young adults, along with Colt Gill and the chair and vice chair of the state board, to have a conversation about that, and Carmen as well as the deputy director at ODE. So the advocacy from those students coming forward has been heard by the department. And so I want to give credit where credit's due. And a lot of the credit also needs to go to the Department of Education for recognizing that and appreciating that, and wanting to learn and improve a temporary rule that will become more of a permanent rule in the future. And it's a great opportunity to take something that's temporary and improve it as it becomes a permanent rule. So that's where that is right now. That's
great. And I mean, we're talking about something that happened in the course of a week. So I'm just a really nimble action around policy, and goodness knows government doesn't move fast, but this is a situation where government is moving really quickly. So the other item that I wanted to bring up is Dr. Whitebear and I have been in informal dialogue, mostly over Facebook Messenger, about the board taking up a land acknowledgement. And that I should probably stop there and let Lou take over. But as I'm reflecting, I'm realizing that there's going to be an election in May and that the future is uncertain. And for me personally, this is something that I would really like to get done by the end of the year. And so I'm bringing it up now because I think the board is doing a lot of really good work right now, and I want to maintain that momentum. And I think this is an achievement that we can get this year, and I think it's going to send a strong message to the community. It's something that OSU has already does. I don't know if the city does, but I think that we should have a land acknowledgement at each of our meetings. So Lou, would you like to speak to that at all?
Sure, and I think that as we enter into those conversations of what that looks like, there's a lot of learning that needs to happen too. And there's plenty of resources actually out there that explain the significance and why they're necessary. One of the things too, with talking about land acknowledgements is understanding that it's more than just acknowledging like part of history and acknowledging settler colonialism. It's about embracing an Indigenous based practice. And so as you're doing those, you're actually doing you're enacting that practice yourself as well. So it's something that Indigenous peoples have done since way before it was like something that people think should be done. And it's something that predates colonization too, of acknowledging whose land you're on and out of respect, and to acknowledge that you're a guest on lands too. So usually when I do land acknowledgements, I like to remind people that that they're still alive too. The Kalapuya people, the Marys River Band in particular from Corvallis are still, like their descendants are still here. And so that's something also that's important as we enter in those conversations of like, how do we honor that connection? And I know I've talked about this before about like honoring the contributions of the local tribes to this community and the tribal members within our district that are part of those two tribes of Grand Ronde and Siletz as well. Because I know that there are likely people, I actually know there are people that are from the local tribes in the district. And so knowing and respecting that, I think is really important. And when the one that OSU has, I'm happy to share, that was grassroots efforts from faculty and students on campus and in partnership with one of the tribes for accuracy. And it wasn't intended to be read verbatim. It's more like an email signature. So I'd be happy to have conversations or perhaps schedule some time to have a deeper dive in this. And I can share some learning materials as well with you all if you're interested. There's some great modules out there that from external folk that have put together, but it's really about understanding that it's a practice that's an Indigenous based practice. And in these times, it's important that like there's action associated with that acknowledgement too. So like how we've been talking action a lot, and that's a big part of it too. So thanks, Vince. And so that's where I'm at with that.
Thank you, Lou. I appreciate it. Thanks, Vince. I remember it's been a few meetings where I did not ask for future topics just because you know how busy the agenda is, but I'll put this as one of the future topics and up high on the priority because it is high on the priority. So thank you for mentioning that. And maybe Lou and Vince, I can connect with both of you and we can prepare for some information with staff and see how we can approach this, whether it's a resolution and if there is any educational material to be presented along with that as well. So really thank you for mentioning it, and I'll list it there. Is there any further comments?
I had one, but I totally forgot what it was. I was like, I raised a hand for something and.
So it was before Vince mentioned the language acknowledgements.
It was totally before that. It was totally unrelated, and I don't remember what it is now, but we'll call it, I guess we'll call it good with that.
All right. So with that, I'll ask Sorry. Okay. With that, I'll ask if there's any future topics board members would like to see in future meetings. All right. Well, I promise that meetings will be busy. Sarah?
Sorry. I was hitting the mute button instead of the hand raise button. Yeah, I am worried about one of our academic achievement goals and how especially the pandemic is affecting that. And I think it's also a big equity issue. And that's the reading by third grade. It's difficult to identify kids who are struggling and get them services. It's even more difficult to identify children who are not native English speakers. And it's, I'm sure, even more difficult to identify those kids when we have them learning remotely. And so I think I would like us at some point to take a serious look at how we're identifying children who need intervention on reading, not just some extra help, but really working on dyslexia and other learning differences, how we're identifying those children, and take a strong look at it through an equity lens to make sure that we're meeting those, we're finding the kids who need to be found, and we're getting resources to them. I was thinking about this week as I was logging my daughter in to work with her tutor. And as I do, a lot of times the hats come on and off. And here's the parent logging my daughter into her tutor to work on some of her reading dyslexia issues. And then I'm thinking, how many kids in this district, because of the state of the world and because finding a tutor is hard and paying for a tutor is hard, are not getting these same opportunities as my kid is. So that's a bee in my bonnet.
Thank you. I have Vince and then Lou.
I just want to jump onto Sarah's topic. This is a conversation that I've had with a few school boards over the last few weeks, is that there's a dearth of data. And so I, speaking now as my own board member, I would love to have a deep dive into assessment and what assessment looks like under CDL. And so and it goes along with this conversation that Sarah has raised, is how are we assessing our kiddos? How nimble is that assessment? So we're not talking, there was no SBAC last year, so that's not going to do us any good. So, and I don't know what that looks like. And I know teachers are assessing somehow. I just don't know what that looks like. And so and I don't know if that has firmed up yet. And so, just getting some input, some have the board have some learning from our teaching and learning team would be really nice.
Yeah, and it's, gets more complicated because sometimes even when we are having standardized tests, when you've got kids who are young and have large vocabularies, they can fake you out and claw themselves to hitting minimum requirements and not raising red flags. But as they get farther along and that vocabulary isn't holding them up anymore, it gets harder. And so it's, it's tough to find those kids. And we need to do it if we're going to hit that reading at grade level by third grade.
Thank you. Lou?
I remembered what it was, and it's totally unrelated to what everybody just said, but I think that's a concern for all of us, though, like where students are with everything. I just wanted to acknowledge that it's Queer History Month. October's Queer History Month, and wanted to just say to all the staff, students, and parents that are part of the LGBTQ plus community, happy Queer History Month. Stay fabulous, and just wanted you to know that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Good job. Thank you. With that, I want to mention thank you, Lou, for presenting at Basic Rights Oregon, and also joined attorney Lorena Reynolds on Monday presenting the policy that the school board passed the non-discrimination based on gender and gender identity. It was really great involvement, young folks who were interested in making change in their districts. We heard from student voice as well. And I got a few inquiries, can we take this policy and present it to our boards? So I'm hoping that a change is coming, and really thank you for the board who voted for this, and for this board for the commitment, and for the students and the community members who made that happen. Thanks for mentioning that, Lou.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Any other comments or future agenda topics? All right, seeing none, have a wonderful evening and good night. We are adjourned.